Welcome, everybody. Hi, my name is Kevin Ells, Marketing Manager here at Haptic, and I'm joined here today with Krupal Modi. Today, we'll be discussing the meaning of contextual conversations with respect to virtual assistants and artificial intelligence. We'll be discussing how these virtual assistants can learn to hold conversations by retaining information just like us mortals do. Now, before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Krupal Modi is our VP of Machine Learning here at Haptic. He's quite a mover and shaker with the AI world. In fact, he was honored as one of the top 40 under 40 scientists, data scientists, I should say, at the annual Machine Learning Developers Summit. And this award recognizes India's youngest data scientists. I won't ask how young you are, Krupal, but I'm assuming you must be under 40. And this talks about the leaders who are supporting the growth of analytics in their organization and have deep industry insight and expertise, and they're addressing the challenges and insights for their clients by addressing the most complex challenges. And we'll be talking about one of those complex challenges in just a second. In fact, at Haptic, Krupal specializes in rapid prototyping of machine learning algorithms and has effectively deployed multiple models in production addressing a variety of different use cases. I'm delighted to have you here today, Krupal.
Thanks, Kevin, for the introduction. I hope by the end of this video, we can all understand what are contextual conversations and how does a virtual assistant support it.
Sounds good. Now, before we get started, we probably should set up what is a contextual conversation. So a conversation, as you know, as we are having, is a conversation between humans. It's more natural and effortless compared to a conversation between, say, a human and a virtual assistant in the current state that they're in. Now, the primary reason for this is the cognitive ability of the computer or the virtual assistant to really remember historical interactions. Humans remember what we just said, and it's pretty simple for us to have a conversation because I know what I just said 10 seconds ago. But the trick is, how can a computer remember that kind of thing? And that's the course of this conversation today. The cognitive ability of remembering and understanding historical context is very hard to establish in a virtual assistant, even though they've come a long way. So we're going to talk today in this discussion, and we'll elaborate on the meaning of contextual conversations, respecting to virtual assistants, and break them down into the terms and how it's measured. So Krupal, before we dive in, is there anything else you'd like to share before I start hitting you with multiple questions? I'm ready to fire away at you.
No, let's go in.
Let's do it. All right, here we go. So question number one, how does a bot retain context? And how does it remember the context of the conversation?
So I think first what we need to do is we need to break down what context is to understand this. So simply put, it is just a common ground of understanding on top of which two speakers interact with each other, right? So this common ground of understanding consists of multiple things. The one of the things which is very critical to it is historical conversation. So historical conversation, just taking an example, if we spoke about something yesterday and if we are speaking again today, then I am assuming that you remember whatever we spoke about yesterday. So that is just a historical conversation is just one of the component of it. The second component which we need to understand is the domain knowledge. So let's say if you are my insurance agent and if I am telling you that my policy has expired yesterday, I am assuming that since you are my agent, you know which is the policy which has expired yesterday, and you will. That's an assumption which I'm making based on your domain knowledge, right? Considering that you are an insurance expert.
Yep.
The third component, which is very very important again, is just common sense and knowledge. Taking an example of that, if you were to ask me that, hey Krupal, can you please give your phone number to me? And if I say a single word, which is why, now, this single word actually means why do you need my phone number?
Right.
It also means that, I'm showing some sort of reservation in giving my phone number to you. And I want to know the reason. So just that single word why has communicated so many things, right?
Yep.
So that's just the common sense and logic. So I think three things: historical understanding, domain knowledge, and then there's a reasoning and logic on top of it. So the way virtual agents do this is the first thing which you need is simple memory. If you want to store anything, you need a memory. So every virtual assistant has a memory in which it can store certain data from the past interactions. So what data you store is again very important. Different data points from the historical interactions or the overall domain knowledge can be stored in that memory. And the third thing is this the reasoning capability on top of that data, which is stored in your memory. So that's how, like, let's say for any virtual agent to actually support contextual conversations, these are very, very fundamental building blocks. And yeah, I think, I hope that gives
Yeah, it does.
some degree
It
of
makes
understanding.
sense. It's not just simply capturing a word and remembering you said the word why, but it's the remembering what it asked you before you responded with that word or series of words. And it also knows in the context of what kind of conversation we're having. It knows we're talking about insurance. We're not talking about e-commerce in this case. Excellent. So we're having a conversation. How long can this conversation or long can this be retained? Is the retention configurable so you can let it forget so it will start asking you questions again later?
So retention is configurable on most platforms, either in terms of time or in terms of maximum number of messages which you can go back in the past. Uh, any conversational AI platform has certain limitations, and those are mostly configured around these two parameters: time and number of messages in the history, which you can look into. And depending upon the use cases, these parameters can vary. For example, most use cases where the user intent is strong, the conversations generally happen within 1 or 2 sessions, and you don't really have to go back in time so much, right?
Hmm.
uh, However, there are certain use cases where we have seen the conversation lasting for as long as 24 hours.
Yep.
We support that as well, and that can be customized. Uh, the Another aspect is that there is certain information which is always stored persistently forever. For example, transaction details. So during the conversation, if you have done any transactions or you've done taken any action which is like a milestone in achieving your goal, then those are things which are stored persistently. Some of the preferences of the users, details of the users such as contact details, or preferences like, uh,
Language.
if it's an airline bot and you selected, let's say, aisle seat, then that is an information which can be stored persistently for future. Yeah, so that is how certain things are configurable, while there is certain important information which is stored persistently for future usage.
I imagine there's certain rules on things you want to forget too, as well as also retain. Now, retaining this information with our solution, we work across multiple channels. So you could be starting a conversation on the web, and then you could be passing that over to potentially WhatsApp or a voice assistant or a live assistant. Can this context be retained across these channels?
Yes, it can be retained across these channels. However, one of the hardest problem in the industry right now is maintaining identity across these channels. So as long as the identity of the user can be confirmed in form of some sort of unique ID, uh, it context can be retained across channels. So the practical problem of actually identifying the user as soon as he interacts, and mapping across channels, that is the problem to be solved. Uh, in many cases, that can be solved with by just asking user for the identity whenever he comes for the first time and mapping him across other channels. But it is certainly possible as long as the identity can be established.
And you set the identity, and then you set a UID or a user ID. Then you keep that UID with them as they pass, and you're literally passing them across channels. Now, do you have to pass them across the channels, so they can go to one channel and then literally call in and pick up with uh, a voice assistant, automated voice assistant, and give them my name, and they go, okay, yes, that UID was having a conversation on a chat bot, and pick it up and continue the conversation there. I'm sorry, I'm holding a phone over here as a prop. I'm
Uh,
pointing.
it is it is completely possible. However, when it comes to identity, things like phone number or email ID works better to confirm rather than the name or anything that has to be unique. It is very essential to. I know it can be a pain for user to actually provide you that thing again, but that unique identity has to be established before mapping context across different channels.
Okay, so when you say context retention, what kind of data are you retaining exactly? We talked about name and email address and phone number. What else are you capturing?
So one of the important things which gets captured is intent of the user. Uh, what was the core intent of the user? That is one of the very important piece that is captured. Uh, Second thing is obviously a lot of uh, information about the user, about his transactions, about his preferences. That is something which makes it into the context data. Third thing is also like certain business logic. For example, if there is a coupon which can be redeemed only once and the user has already redeemed it, then that is the information which has to be stored somewhere and then used in future conversations. So that's mostly like business specific information. And apart from this, there is a lot of language metadata also, just for understanding utterances which you probably anticipate in future. So certain granular linguistic data is also stored. I'll probably give some examples ahead in the conversation.
Okay, good. Um, in terms of content retention, then what do we do differently from our competition? It seems to me like everybody should be offering this. What makes us unique?
So there are a few things. So every conversational AI platform, including Haptic, actually stores certain essential things like intent, entities, and user preferences. However, one of the things which we try to do differently is we try to use a lot more granular information from the history. I will give you couple of examples so that you can relate to it. Uh, so Haptic does something called query reformulation. What that means is, let us take an example, that user was conversing about getting the refund,
Hmm.
and his next message is, when will I get it?
Got it.
Now this message actually means, when will I get the refund money, right? So
Yep.
one of the unique things which Haptic attempts to do is query reformulation before actually processing the message. Uh, this enables a very smooth and natural conversational experience. Uh, I can give you another example. For example, Haptic supports something called a document search, which is any enterprise can integrate their knowledge base on Haptic platform,
Yep.
and uh, the virtual agent will try to answer from that particular knowledge base. So while actually looking for the answer in that particular knowledge base, we not only consider the last message or the most recent message of the user. However, all other messages sent in the past are also considered in order to frame the appropriate query and find the most relevant answer, most accurate answer for that particular query. So this entire reformulating the query is something which we do very, very uniquely in terms of context retention.
That sounds really complex. So that is quite unique, where it's not just taking a single word and like passing a word and doing a search on a word, but it's actually putting that word into context and saying, looking back where the conversation was talking about to give that word context. Makes sense.
Okay.
Well, this is really educational, Krupal. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to share, or we wait till the next episode to hear from you again?
I think that's it for this episode. I
Excellent.
hope I helped everyone understand the meaning of context.
And Krupal, you've also contributed highly to our blog. We have a blog here for technical visitors, for engineers and developers. It's written around machine learning, artificial intelligence, with obviously a focus on virtual assistants. It's really good. Got a lot of details in there. Of course, it's not for everybody. We have other blogs on our website. We have one we call a technical blog, and then we have the corporate blog. And on the corporate blog, you'll find content like more general subject matter, industry-focused content. We also have webinars, podcasts, and a whole bunch more resources there for you to take a look at. So depending on your interest, technical or more general, you'll find something for everybody. Krupal, I appreciate you coming here today, and I look forward to our next conversation. Have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.